Hi everybody, this is Nate with another Backcountry beer review. Today I'm on the Trouble Benchmark, which is a 12,000 foot peak in New Mexico, one of only 36 or so 12,000 footers in New Mexico. It is just beautiful. It's this like wide, flat mountain that you gotta kind of maneuver around a little bit to get some pretty cool views, but they're there and they're just awesome. Amazing views to all of northern New Mexico, especially northeastern New Mexico. Just amazing. Can see into Colorado, see some 14ers. Just a pretty cool peak, a long hike. It's not really hitting me yet that I've already hiked like 7 or 8 miles and I have to do it again to get back to my car. It's still lager summer. Hashtag lager summer. Of course, that's the time of year where I pretty much, only review lagers. I like to feature different kinds of lagers, and I actually had an issue. I like to come out with a beer review twice per month. I think that's a pretty good and sustainable clip. More often, I might not be able to keep up that pace just because it's a lot to get out and hike and do these trips, and I can't always guarantee that I'm going to get out twice a month to do a hike. Any less, I feel like I'm just not doing it enough to be worthwhile. So twice a month is a good number for me, and I had a real conundrum. There were many lagers that I wanted to review for lager summer, and I always save Labor Day weekend lager summer backcountry beer review for Oktoberfest, and I always save the last beer review for a, let's call it, cold weather lager. So given that this is the last lager before then, I had to make a hard choice, and this was the one I picked. And this beer is by Arrow Brewing Co in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It is their Easy Cactus Mexican-style dark lager. Arrow, if you watch this channel, they're no stranger to you. I've reviewed them twice. Ironically, or coincidentally perhaps, both times I reviewed them was for lager summer. It's not really doing that on purpose. I don't think that Arrow's non-lager beers are bad. They always tend to make interesting lagers, so I tend to be gravitating towards them when I do the lager summer beer reviews, and I try not to review the same breweries too often. So I've still not been to Arrow, but as always, whenever I try a Arrow beer, it is very good. So there's nothing really on the can here. It just says it's a Mexican-style dark lager brewed in the American Southwest. So pretty appropriate that I get to enjoy it in the American Southwest. Time for a sip. Sorry if it's a little windy. I really wanted you guys to see this view, and unfortunately there's nowhere else I can really get it where it's not windy. But let's talk about the beer. Really roasty. I'm getting some slight bitterness, which I'm sure this beer, I don't think it says on the can what its IBUs are. I'm sure this beer has very low IBUs. This is the thing I really like about reviewing these lagers, is that even a little bit of bitterness can really be noticed and really shine with the balance of the other beers, or with the other flavors in the beer. That's what's really special about good lagers. So right off the bat, commendations to this beer for doing that. Those roasty and kind of slightly bitter notes really, to me, with maybe a mild, ever so slight caramelness and ever so slight smokiness, just a natural smokiness, kind of leads me to think that this is really like cold brew coffee. It really does not have the sharpness of a hot coffee or a espresso. It lacks that. It's definitely more smooth, like a cold brew coffee. I think that's aided a little bit by the fact that the mouth feels a little thin. It is pretty well carbonated. When I open it up, when I poured it at home, there was a huge head, lots of froth came out, but the actual carbonation I think is pretty thin. It's maybe it's just my imagination, but it tastes slightly less carbonated than a typical beer, and that lends to the mouthfeel, especially leaning into that cold brew coffee note that I'm getting. See, what else am I getting? I'm not really getting any noticeable hot notes aside from maybe just some general earthiness meets vegetal noble hop type flavor. I'm assuming this is made with noble hops. Can't be sure though. Yeah, it's just the finish. The finish is crisp. It's very lagery in that it's crisp. It kind of dies away nicely. It doesn't linger too long. It doesn't have a gross flavor. It's a really excellent beer. I'm not super well versed, honestly, in the dark Mexican lager. Come to think of it, I've probably only had 2 that I can sit here and tell you today that I remember what they tasted like, and that'd be Negro Modelo and I really like La Reforma Brewing in Albuquerque. They just don't can their beers like in this format, so I cannot review them on a beer review, but they make an amazing dark Mexican lager, and those are really like the only two examples I can kind of think of off the top of my head. And the dark Mexican lager style to me is interesting because it doesn't have like the dark chocolatey notes of like, say, the Czech dark lager I reviewed 2 years ago from Bow and Arrow. It's a little bit caramely, though I think this one is pretty off dry to the point where I know caramel note doesn't necessarily mean sweet, but I don't really know if I'm getting caramel or sweetness. That's probably all I have to say about it. It's a very good beer. Cheers, happy lager summer, and have a backcountry beer for me.